I reject the notion that we need to sacrifice other parts of our identity in order to parent. And I think that we are made better parents by our allegiance to our own magic, our own desires, our own personalities. I'm certain of that, in fact.
I'm Nikko Snyder, and this is Parenting Creative, a podcast that explores the places where creative life and parenting collide and all the magic and mess that ensues. In our inaugural season, we're delving into the creative lives of parents making art that ranges from theater and music to poetry, journalism, and craft. Our goal is to build community and connection for those living deep in the struggles of caring for others, while at the same time prioritizing their own creative lives. If you'd like to hear more conversations about making art while parenting, please help grow our community by following Parenting Creative wherever you get your podcasts, leaving us a 5-star review with a few kind words, and visiting parentingcreative.com to sign up for our email newsletter. Today I'm talking to BC-based theater artist Marya Folinsbee. We talk about resiliency, absurdism in life and in theater, sneaking up on writing, finding magic in the mundane, perseverance, and how art insists upon itself, sometimes over years, the role of solitude and retreat, redefining creative work and productivity, and Marya's new play, The Mosquitos, which will be produced at the Capitol Theatre in Nelson, BC in spring 2025. On her website, Marya writes about herself, "I've studied, facilitated, and performed in traditional Western and contemporary drama, clown, and physical theater, theater of the oppressed, and more. I've also been schooled in motherhood by my own generous and demanding teacher babies. They've given me a whole new perspective on the art of clown. I believe in play as a powerful, transformative, healing gift both to adults and to children. It's in play that we learn how to be and who we might want to be. Play is where we can imagine a different world and rehearse it into being." Here's my conversation with playwright, clown, teacher, theater artist, and parent, Marya Folinsbee. Hi, Marya.
Hi, Nikko.
Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to welcome you to Parenting Creative. And this is the first episode of the podcast that I am recording. So it's extra exciting.
Yay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad you could be here. Before we get started, I want to just talk a little bit about how we know each other. So we know each other like a few different ways. Like we're on the parent advisory council at our kids' school, and you were my kids' baseball coach and things like that. And we also have been in a writing group together. And that writing group isn't active at the moment, but about a year ago, we were meeting just like a few neighbor moms who write. We're meeting every couple weeks. And yeah, that time was like the writing part was great. Writing together was super fun. But actually what was the most impactful for me about that experience was talking to other parents about creative practice and creative process.
Right.
And hearing about how other parents were creating, time and finding energy to center their creative lives, all while doing this wild parenting thing that we do and trying to raise kids in this kind of crazy world that we're in. So I would come away from those conversations really invigorated, energized, inspired. And that was really actually the genesis of this idea of wanting to kind of have these conversations, like talk to other parents about creative life and, how parenting informs their art and how art informs their parenting, and just wanting to share those stories. So that's how this idea got started. And so I'm just really excited and delighted that you, and this is exactly what I was envisioning, was having you as one of my very first conversations. So just want to say again, welcome, Marya Folinsbee, to Parenting Creative. Really, really excited to get to talk to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I agree that talking about process, I'm always fascinated by, and that space was, there was lots of wonderful things about that writing group, but yeah, talking about process with other people and hearing their process and reflecting is very nourishing. And
totally.
Yeah, and not always something we actually think about I think, or, there's not a lot of time for it, kind of.
Yeah, that was a unique space for me to talk about ideas with other adults, I guess, is what it comes down to.
Yeah,
Sadly.
totally. Uninterrupted adult conversations.
Totally.
Amazing.
Okay, so that was just my little kind of context about us and that we know each other. I guess I'll also mention that we are both, we're recording on the unceded and traditional territories of the Sinaiax people, and also want to invite you to, I guess, introduce yourself, like where are you coming from in the world and from your worldview, and just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah. Okay. So my name's Marya Folinsbee. I'm a theater artist is how I usually describe myself, and have been a creative person my whole life. And I think now it's only in the last 10 years or so that I've claimed theater artist as like an identity and part of like my life way, I guess, or, that it's more than just a hobby. Although like the word professional is weird to me, but whatever. I have lived on Sinaiax Pulau for 12 years or so, and came here by way of, I was born and grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, which is Treaty 6 territory and also known as Amiskiwaskihikin. My ancestry is mostly from the British Isles and the Netherlands, but my family has been long-time settlers in Canada. Yeah, and I grew up in Edmonton. I went to university in Hamilton, Ontario, which was a very formative place to live for quite a long time. And then came here in 2010 and became a parent here. And and also, I guess, transitioned from just being a creative person to being an artist in that time, whatever that means.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think partially it's like getting paid to make art was something that never really happened to me before then. But mostly I would say it's like stepping into that identity in a public way and like claiming it versus it just being like something you kind of do for fun. And maybe it's also about process and accountability that I feel like I have more accountability to myself and others in the work that I do. And I don't feel as guilty about it now. Like it feels justified in some kind of a way, where, there's like a legitimacy thing or this is integrated into my real life. It's not optional or amateur or something. Yeah. And I guess like that's also like I've invested in it emotionally, financially, intellectually, whatever. And also other people have invested in me. But like I said, like I, in university and in high school, I went to a performing arts high school, and in university, I was always involved in theater and involved in performance, but it was I never thought of it as work at the time. And now I'm more able to call it work and not feel like an imposter. Not that I don't sometimes feel like an imposter, but
we all do probably.
Yeah.
I love about you that you seem to just be very comfortable in your artist identity. Like that is very much how I think of you and how I feel like you are in the world. So I love that. You've used the term theater artist. I know that I think of you as a playwright. I know that you perform your own shows. I've seen you kind of in more of a clowning kind of situation. Can you talk about your art practice a bit more, about like how it's evolved, themes that you explore? Yeah, tell us a bit more.
Yeah. Theater artist for me is like the umbrella, but it covers a lot of kinds of work. So I am also an arts administrator as another part of my work life. And I would consider myself an independent theater artist. I'm not part of a union. I don't have an agent. I mostly create my own work. So that means like wearing a lot of hats sometimes. I like am the co-artistic director of a theater company, and I say that, and it's basically just my friend and I just declared ourselves the co-art. We like bought a website domain, and now we're Material Theater or whatever. But that means that we decide what kind of work we want to make and make it, and so. For me, that involves playwriting. It involves devising stories, which is a sort of more like organic, embodied practice of like developing ideas. And sometimes you write them down, sometimes you just like embody them, directing and dramaturging my own work, and also collaborating with other people to do those things. I often am also doing like costume and prop design, and I do most of the production side too, which doesn't really feel artistic, but I think is a big part of, especially now, life as sort of as like self-employed independent artists. You also have to be your own like marketing manager and your own fundraiser and grant writer and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Although those things don't feel as like creatively stimulating, that's also a part of my practice. And I also am a teaching artist, so I, you know, facilitate theater and clown workshops and projects for other people. So the last long time, like most of the work that I've been creating has been mine from beginning to end. It's all kind of been me creating things that I'm intrigued by or excited by, artistically and intellectually, and then figuring out bit by bit how to make that make sense in my life and sustain it, support it in my life. And I am lucky to have a partner who's incredibly supportive and is more of the primary breadwinner in our house, and that I also have skills in other, you know, I have another job that can partially sustain me. But I am finding now that like the stuff that I want to create is pretty consuming, and it would be really nice if it could just be my only full-time job. Like I'm just finishing writing a full-length play with a big cast, and I'm producing it with grant funding this year. And I wish that I could just be only doing that and nothing else. Yeah. But that is not quite a realistic thing yet, I guess.
Yeah. You know, what's leading you as an independent artist, you're really only going towards the things that intrigue you, that you want to explore. What are those things?
I mean, it's interesting because my artistic life has dovetailed with parenthood pretty strongly. And probably 20 years ago, the kind of stuff I was making, I mean, I was like an anarchist confronting empire, and my work was reflecting that a lot more, I would say, and was sort of like trying to make an argument for a different way of being, a different like path through the world, alternative culture. Yeah. And then my life changed quite a bit. And I would say in the last 10 years or more as an artist, the themes that keep coming up for me, the big one is navigating between domestication and wildness. And this is a line from my new play, but feeling simultaneously the most animal I've ever felt and the most human. And I think Parenthood really like brought that out in me, that like I've always been a bit repressed in relation to my own instincts. I think I'm like, I don't trust my instincts or something. And I think Parenthood really like awakened an instinctual relationship to my animal body that I hadn't been as in touch with before. And so a lot of my work in the last few years has been about that in one way or another, domestication and wildness, and the way like that we're colonized into the roles that we play in the world. I mean, the state change of becoming a mother for me was really like mind-blowing, and the sort of loss of self and then the rediscovery of self and the like negotiation of that identity are big themes that still show up in my work quite a lot. The risk and the responsibility of being a parent, and I guess existential dread. I'm really inspired by absurdist theater, which tends to explore themes around like nihilism and futility and the sort of like being helpless and also powerful at the same time, and like what that means. And I think those themes merge quite well with parenthood for me anyway. I was obsessed with absurdist theater as a teenager, and then other things happened in my life, and now I feel like I've returned to that way of thinking as I've gotten a little bit older, and I'm dealing with the paradoxes of being alive in a fragile human body and being responsible for other fragile human bodies, and what a big deal it all is, and then also sort of how completely insignificant at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, even even the experience of parenting, if I think about something that is, simultaneously the feeling of powerfulness and futility moment to moment. Mm-hmm. It's an apt way to think about how raising children feels. Marya's new play, The Mosquitos, is inspired by theater of the absurd, a movement that developed in the late 1940s as humanity was grappling with the chaotic fallout of World War II. Playwrights such as Samuel Beckett, Eugene Ionesco, and Jean-Paul Sartre explored absurdism, alienation, disorientation, and the failure or breakdown of communication. It's really all too relevant in the current political climate in 2025. One thing that I love about you is how you bring theater into every kind of mundane, the most mundane and day-to-day situations like that. I feel you actively bringing magic into just your life, your day-to-day life, which I really love. And just one quick example is, and I told you this before, but when we went to our last baseball game of the season, and you and your partner were coaching and so handing out these certificates of accomplishment to all the children, and which could just be, that happens at any time at any child sports league of all time, anywhere. But yeah, there was this magical, you created, it was a piece of theater that you created around the delivery of it and the presentation of it, which to me, just at that moment, I was oh, that's really, really magical in terms of just creating magic from anything, taking inspiration from life's moments. And yeah, I love that.
Well, thank you. I didn't really realize that that's something I do till you kind of named it. Although now I know what you mean. I do think that a lot of that is just in me, is I'm not aware of that, or it's not necessarily intentional. It just is. Yeah, kind of the language I speak in the world. One of the things I feel I've learned from being a theater artist is the potency of ceremony and spectacle and ritual and kind of symbolism in the way that we narrate our own lives. And that is the thing with it, is you can kind of find it anywhere. And if you look at any play, it's just mundane human relationship stuff, but made significant kind of just by our attention to it. And, that's what all storytelling is forever, has always just been oh, let's pay attention to this with our words, with our time, with our voice, whatever it is. And I think it certainly makes my life richer. I feel, I guess, lucky to that my art flows into real life enough in that way. Almost that now it is kind of second nature, I guess.
I'm wondering what that means for your parenting. What kind of parent does that make you?
One thing that I'm happy about is that my kids have been with me through and witnessed my the development of this part of my life. And that, I don't know, I think that it's modeling self-love and strength and identity or something. I haven't sacrificed who I am for parenthood, which I think is, for me anyways, absolutely rooted in feminist philosophy and, I don't know, justice. I think my kids also just sort of take for granted, this is our life and this is one of the things that my mom does. But hopefully it's a good example that they might be inspired by in whatever way, in their lives.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we've talked a little bit about before, but just in terms of what things that you're modeling to your kids. I mean, one thing, they are seeing you live this life, choosing this life as an artist.
Yeah.
And I think going through sometimes like the ups and downs of that, like the real struggles. And I think, I'd love to hear a little bit about that, like just them being with you through that journey and what that means.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is cool and that I'm still figuring out and learning is that it's a process. I think seeing and participating in art as like just a part of your everyday life, and mundane and up and down and in and out and like long process, for me has taken the kind of like vauntedness out of it, the kind of like untouchability, like magic in some way. And it's like, this is labor as much as anything else is labor. And it doesn't go from like nothing to like magic overnight. It is like a thing that you learn and a thing that you do better. And I fail again, fail better. Like it's all about process. And I think when I was a kid, I probably wasn't really aware of that. And I think kids often are afraid to make mistakes or fail at things because they don't see the thing going from nothing to something spectacular. They just see the spectacle. They just see like the finished movie or the TV show or the painting or whatever it is. And they're not aware of the struggle and strife and anxiety and grief and like 10 terrible drafts that go into it. And so I think it has been really good for like our kids will often like watch rehearsals and they'll see the process. They'll like help me build props for my shows, or they'll like see the pile of weird stuff in our storage room of like, oh, that's the mannequin I tried to make, or that was this failed thing. Like they've seen the work that I do in every stage of its development and taking some of the power out.
The mystique
the mystique totally out of the process and observing it as like you can be a normal person with a normal life who also happens to like think interesting things and create interesting things. I think that is a really good lesson for any kid to learn. My kids still struggle with perfectionism or like not wanting to fail or, like that sort of the shame of a mistake or whatever. But I do think that to some extent we've been able to model that process part that is like a great lesson.
I think the example that you had shared with me when we talked before was the work that you were putting together in the summer and it wasn't coming together. Like it was not really coming together the way you hoped. And maybe you were like panicking a little bit. And just that like they were there for that. They were witness to that. And
they were there for that. And when you say panicking a little bit, I'm like, I was like falling apart. And there was this one night I was like trying to pack. We were going to the Edmonton Fringe, and my parents live in Edmonton, so it's like a big family adventure. We kind of combine our like Fringe performance with a holiday. So I was like up here trying to pack and just like burst into tears. And my son, who's 12, came up and like found me crying on the floor. And it was so sensitive and perceptive. Like he knew that this had been going on. He knew that this like process had been quite stressful. And he was like, are you like worried about the play? 'Cause it's going to be fine. You guys are going to do great. Like, I know you're going to figure it out and it's going to be awesome. And he was so, he was so encouraging. And it's funny because I would love for him to apply that kind of language to his own stuff sometimes. But he was, he believed in us and he recognized that this was like a moment in the process, but not the end result. And I think I go through a version of that. That was a particularly extreme state of self-doubt and panic that I was in with that show. Like we didn't have the summer was really stressful. We didn't have enough time to develop it the way we wanted. But every single piece of theater I've ever made, you go through that. There is like, you're excited, here's your idea, throw things at the wall, rehearse, etc. Wait a minute. This is insane and stupid and everyone's going to hate me. I have come to accept that that is part of the process, but it still can absolutely floor me. And I think that he has probably consciously or unconsciously been witnessing that his whole life. This like listening to me like bemoan my work with people and then does see the final product and it's not terrible. So yeah, that was totally a moment of him parenting me. And it totally felt like a lovely lesson that he had in some way learned, where he was just very sensitive to me as an artist and my process. And yeah, and had like the right words too, which was so nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, and interesting. It was an interesting parenting moment too, I'd say.
Sure. Going back to that, I mean, the perseverance that is required with any creative process, like, you know, just keeping on and working through the blocks and the low moments and the manic moments or whatever. But like, you know, that perseverance and the resiliency, you know, modeling that resiliency to kids. Oh my gosh, like huge. And also, you know, that fail and that willingness to that is part of the process and to not be, I know that is like an important part of your creative process is embracing that failure. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it has just been learning that and like experiencing it. Like it's one thing to say like, oh, failures can be fruitful. Failure is part of the process. It's another thing to experience it and see the result and then go along. Sometimes it feels like the work is dragging me along, and I'm constantly in awe of how like art insists upon itself sometimes. Like the play that I'm writing right now, I've been writing for 5 years, and not like every day for 5 years, but the idea came to me 5 years ago. And so many times I had no idea what it was about, no idea what I was doing, felt completely lost, was just writing absolute trash, or would like write something and give up on it. It's been through so many drafts, and it's wild to have seen that through to a point where I'm almost ready to produce it. But it was like the play needed to get written. It wasn't like I needed to write the play, or that was the feeling. That's the story of it or whatever. And that has been a very empowering experience for me, I think, was just like being dragged along, losing faith in it so many times, and then having it bubble back to the surface, or having the epiphany, or having just being comfortable with an unmapped, inconceivable process. It's like I did not know how it was going to go, and I did not know how it was going to get from nothing to something. I just knew that, or I believed that it probably would, or that it might if I kept trying. And kind of like letting the process happen to me. And I like discovered a lot of things about process, and I also like pursued learning about it, like I sought out podcasts and read books and like took classes and talked to other artists, and I learned a lot and gathered a lot of information about how people do this. But also it was just like, what is going to happen will happen, how it happens, and like you just have to be as present as you can be for it and work as hard as you're able to, and surf the emotional waves and deal with the other things in your life, and then see how they show up in the work too. I'm always kind of amazed by like this play could have been anything. And it's still like, how do I know that this is what it's supposed to be? And it could have just as easily been something else. Like art is also strange in that way that there are infinite options for how it might become or what it might be in the end. And eventually you kind of just have to decide this is the one that's right. Like when I finished the sort of the draft that I'm working from now that really is the shape of the play that it is now, I was like, okay, I'm done. Like I know that, but how do I know that? And who says it's done? And why is it done? And why is it done now? And like, what does this mean? And yeah, I think that's kind of the magic of it. I also have gotten comfortable with the idea that like art is great even when it's not perfect, and art is great even when we're not ready for it, or
even when it's not successful in the world.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And not every, like my art's not for everyone. Like I'm kind of done trying to satisfy other people exactly. It's like what I want is to feel that I have done something as well as I can with as much honesty or resonance as I could find in it, and like given the idea what it deserves, but that like it won't be perfect and it won't be universally loved. And that's fine. In fact, that's great and totally exciting. I was reflecting about this just the other day so I joined a like community band last year, and I played trombone in like a community band, and I played trombone in like junior high and hadn't played it in more than 20 years when I kind of got like
shoulder tapped for the band.
Yeah, I got voluntold into yes. And I kind of joined ambivalently and was like, okay, I'll like come to a rehearsal and see what's up. Like I liked playing trombone when I used to play it, whatever, we'll see. And I was not good, and I'm not good at sight reading, and I hadn't played in 20 years. My tone, like I didn't do well at band practice the first time I went, but it was so fun. And making mistakes was fun, and trying and then getting better was fun. Like everything about it was fun. And it was like, because it was just for fun and because there was no judgment and the stakes were just like, we're here together making music. Like nobody was judging me. And it was so liberating and joyful and stimulating. And yeah, now I'm like all in, try to never miss a rehearsal, and having an outlet like that, an arts practice that's like that, where nothing matters except your own joy in it, has been very, very healthy for me, and like healed some of that perfectionism or that like product versus process headspace that you can get into, and has taught me a lot about resilience, I guess, or self-confidence or something.
I can imagine also like a really nice counterpoint to, you're like trying to, you're working on this grant funded, like big production, and to have something that kind of can offset or like remind of a different way of being in, like in art too.
Yeah. And I think, like all the arts I think used to be like that. And really it's capitalism that has messed up all of our relationships to these things, that like it's only valuable if you're making a living from it, or the only measure of success is like number of tickets sold or whatever. Yeah. So having an outlet where none of that is relevant is important. And I have been working on letting that also inform my like so-called professional arts practice as much as possible as well. I also think, I'm like turning 40 next month, and I think that there's that story that like women over 40 stop giving a fuck or whatever. And I don't know if that's true, but I do think I am much less self-conscious and much less concerned with other people's opinions of me than I used to be. Yeah. It is interesting. I still do feel like as an artist, I want to have great conversations about my work. I want people to be moved by it. And with theater, like it's really fun to do. But the last ingredient is always the audience. And like, it is important that they're there. And usually it's important that they are appreciating it, you know, and like as a clown or doing like comedy in particular, like if you're trying to be funny and nobody's laughing, like that's pretty painful.
Yeah.
So it's not like I don't care at all what other people think, but kind of trusting that like my audience will find me or that I'll find my people and there's something we can resonate with together. I think I'm getting better at that and sort of accounting for taste and letting other people have their things and not worrying as much about being like universally loved or whatever.
It's so interesting. I mean, everything about what you've been talking about, we're talking about this unmapped and inconceivable, I think, process that, you know, is what like takes an idea through sometimes years, right, to find its various like this evolution of where that goes, and just that as a metaphor for life, really, right? Like we're not
and
can't
parenting
control
for
and
sure.
parenting. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, our kids are not works of art, but I think our relationship to them can be.
I just want to take a second to thank you for tuning in. Parenting Creative is an independent Canadian podcast. If you like what you hear, please help us grow by taking a few moments to sign up for our email newsletter at parentingcreative.com and by following us on social media. We're at Parenting Creative on Instagram and Blue Sky. There's a couple other things I'd love to talk about. One is like sort of the way that we bring children in to creative process. And then the way sometimes, so that's, you know, on one hand, like we can bring our children in and there's like magic and meaning in that, I think. And then there's other places where it's about keeping children out, right? And like protecting this space and this like, you know, creative self. So yeah, I guess two little things that I know about you, and maybe an example of each of those things is like, so I got to be part of a table read for your play that you're working on. And it was lovely. It was very, it was really community, this beautiful kind of community moment, also very family friendly. Like you had childcare and there was, you know, kids running in and out and kind of experiencing this theater practice that is this table read. And so I love that. And it was really inclusive of our families and our community, I guess, is how that felt. So yeah, curious about sort of those choices of like how to bring children in. And then on the other side, like I know that you know, prioritized going on a retreat, like this solo retreat last year to like focus on your play and like really work on it and really, Yeah,
I don't think theater has always been very inclusive of parents. And and art in general. I feel like there used to be a story of like, especially with women, male artists can father all kinds of children, but the expectation is that they don't actually have to take care of them. Whereas like women, often in previous generations, the idea has been you kind of have to choose, or you'll be bad at one if you're good at the other, kind of. And that's the trade-off. So for me, I mean, most of my friends, most of the people I want to collaborate with are also parents. So there's like the practical, we all have this challenge that, you know, we have to figure out how to integrate. And then also just that like village life, the kind of community that I want to live in, the kind of world I want to live in is multi-generational and integrated and kind of like, if capitalism wasn't involved, art would be getting made all the time in all kinds of ways, and that would necessarily involve our children and involve their participation and feedback and presence and witness. And so, yeah, and I think my kids are better off being in those spaces to some extent. Like I want them to see that and to overhear it. And you know, like my mom has been a part of a book club for my whole life. And I used to pretend to be sleepwalking into the living room whenever her like book club friends were over because it was like a juicy place, you know, they like they were laughing and talking about all this cool stuff, and like they were modeling a collective artistic appreciation and intellectualism that like I found very compelling when I was a kid and was always trying to get into it. And so I do.
Hilarious.
I remember like walking like this into the room, you know, and I like, and of course now I don't begrudge her wanting that private time without me around, but I do think that those spaces are juicy and that our kids benefit from being a part of them. And I also, you know, I want parent perspective on things. And so making space for parents in the ways that I know we need is totally important. And then, yes, I'm a little bit worried that I can't finish a play without a week alone. And not just alone, but also separated from the drudgery of domestic life. And the residency that I've gone on twice now. It's like nearby, but it's like a boat ride away, and it's in this very like minimalist, empty, quiet, clean space. And like part of it is like, oh, you are investing in this time and your whole family is like has come together to like help you out. You know, like your kids are sacrificing a week of mom time and your partner's doing like all of the labor so that you can do this. So there's like that sort of social pressure, I think, of you have to make this valuable.
Yeah.
But it's also the like quieting of monkey mind, quieting of all of the other responsibilities of everyday life in order to focus on art. And I do not apologize for that. I do not, you know, like my kids will be like, I don't want you to go and please don't leave and whatever. And I'm like, I love you and I'm sorry that you're going to miss me, but I am going and I'm not sorry that I'm going. And it's important that I say that. And it's important that they hear that too, I think. And I reject the notion that we need to sacrifice other parts of our identity in order to parent. And I think that we are made better parents by our allegiance to our own magic, our own desires, our own personalities. I'm certain of that, in fact. I think I would be a much angrier, more bitter, you know, more miserable parent if I didn't do those things for myself and if I didn't make my art life valuable. Now I'm sort of starting to learn when I need that, I think, because I've experienced it a couple of times. And I think I probably will schedule in a like retreat for every play that I write from now on, because it's really, really valuable. And it is a thing that's hard to accomplish at home. And there are some artists who have done it. I've read a couple of essays by Ursula Le Guin, who was like an incredibly prolific and brilliant writer and was also a beloved mom, you know, and I think she had like 4 or 5 kids, like that she was raising in the 50s while also writing amazing books.
In fact, Ursula Le Guin had 3 children, born between 1957 and 1964. She credited her husband, Charles Le Guin, with making it possible for her to balance writing and family life. Le Guin wrote about the challenges of balancing writing and parenthood in an essay published in the New York Times in 1989 titled "The Hand That Rocks the Cradle Writes the Books," which I'll link to in the show notes. She wrote, "A person who undertakes responsibility both to her art and to her dependent children has undertaken a full-time double job that can be simply, practically, destroyingly impossible. Of course, many of us these days are trying to find that balance with a triple or even quadruple full-time job."
So it's not like you can't do it, but I suspect Ursula Le Guin was like a very disciplined person. I am not a very disciplined person. I'm also like bad at waking up in the morning. Like, I don't know. I know that enough about myself to know that I will procrastinate with chores. I'll procrastinate with housework or whatever. Yeah, that I will privilege sleeping in over waking up at 5 a.m. to like write 100 pages before my kids get up. Whatever. No shame. It's fine. There's lots of different ways to make art. But I have to go take a boat to some empty house somewhere every once in a while and just focus.
Yeah. You said, that you don't apologize for that and that it makes you a better parent.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious. I love that. I think there are many parents, moms, maybe I would say even more specifically, that would have a really hard time not apologizing for that and feeling like that made them good parents or even better parents. So I'm curious whether that was something that you have come to be able to embrace that, or if that's just part of you. Like, you are not going to apologize for this rejection of, this idea that you have to be one or the other.
Yeah. I don't think I have felt as much guilt as other moms I know feel about their relationship to their kids. And I don't have an explanation for that exactly. I don't know if that was the kind of women who were around me. My mom is a wonderful mom who's incredibly generous and giving. But like I said, was not a super like helicopter parent at all. And the way that I was parented, I had a great childhood and I wasn't always with my mom. In fact, I was not with my mom most of the time. And I had a great time and I love her and I love my dad. Both my parents they're great parents, but like my kids might think that I am in some way harming them by like not constantly being there. Although I don't think they do really, but I think it's good for them. Like, I think it's actually a better choice to both model my own like independence and self-care and being the person that I want to be in the world. Mm-hmm. Modeling that is an important thing to model, and giving them space for independence and self-discovery and imagination and quiet and alone time. And also like that calling in the village, like when I've gone to retreats in the past, they're like at summer camp and they're organizing like after school play dates with their friends and they're engaging with other great adults in their world. And I think this is incredibly important. They're also seeing their dad support their mom in a pretty profound way, which like men should do. I mean, everybody should do. It's not necessarily like an intentional choice. Part of it, I feel like, is just who I am. But when I have to justify it, I think it is quite justified and probably better than having a bitter, grumpy mom who like wishes that she could have been something in the world, but is really, just a sad housewife. I think my kids are better off that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about modeling. We're modeling things to our kids all the time. And, the importance of modeling things to our kids is different depending on the kid too, right? Like you mentioned you have a daughter and a son. And I mean, so modeling you as a whole self-realized artist who is prioritizing that part of you is, I mean, that's important for different reasons, I guess.
Yeah. And different for each of them, for sure. When we had our baby and we're like, oh, you're a boy, that's scary for these like specific and intense reasons related to patriarchal masculinity and, the world, and like, how do you raise good men and what does that mean? And yeah, I do think that being a good parent who is also their own person is like quite an important thing for young men to witness, and witnessing a family that values everybody's like heart needs is a really important lesson for boys.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Maybe in terms of just a little more kind of the concrete, like kind of day to day, curious about, the things that fuel or enable your practice. Like what works for you? And these, like, even to the extent of like, kind of like life hacks, like what do you do to make this you talked about persevering with your play for like 5 years, seeing this
Yeah.
idea, evolve and seeing it through. Like, what are the concrete things that like enable you to do that? And also what are some of the barriers? Like, what just really stops you in your tracks, and how do you navigate those things?
Yeah. I feel like I'm going to have an easier time identifying challenges. The challenging things in my life that I contend with are, like I said, my own lack of discipline and willpower, and just I'm pretty permissive and, like I said, selfish, and sometimes that works against me, where I'm like, oh, it's okay if I just need a moment. I'm just gonna like scroll Instagram for the next half hour, and it's okay that I'm wasting my, alone time, whatever. So I can be a little bit undisciplined, which is a challenge. And then I work from home. My art and my administrator work are both here at this same desk. And so like being strong in my like psychic barrier can be challenging. So I would say, yeah, a barrier around having healthy boundaries. Those things are very challenging for me. And then like I said, find all kinds of ways to procrastinate from my arts practice in real life, housework and stuff like that. One of the life hacks that I found around that is like doing work sideways, is like the things that you can do when you're not actively writing that are contributing to writing. And one of those things is exploring on a theme. So like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I will seek out material to listen to that speaks to the play. So like I'll be like, oh, this character feels like not very well drawn, so I need to listen to a podcast with a person who's kind of like this, or I need to listen to the kind of podcast that this character would listen to, for example. Or if I'm stuck on some kind of like writing issue, there's all kinds of like great writing podcasts and things like that. So doing that sort of side, like lateral work at different times, and like trusting that even if those things don't feel explicitly and obviously productive, they are. And same thing with like taking lots of walks and talking to myself. And I do a lot of like going for walks and like imagining the future that my work exists in, and talking about it and talking as if it's there already. And I don't know if that's really helpful, but I do think that it helps with some sort of confidence or like future visioning, and is clarifying. Those are things that I find very supportive. In nitty-gritty ways, when I'm like, I am going to write today, I find having a timer, I have like a hourglass it's like a 15-minute hourglass, but I also just set the timer on my phone sometimes, and being like, all you're doing is looking at your document or writing during this time. And I find if it's like 15 or 20-minute increments, my like monkey mind that tries to get distracted by other things is willing to go along with that. Like that's enough of a compromise that I don't scroll on Instagram, which to my shame is probably the most, in my way more often than I would like to admit. I started tracking the things that I can do to be productive in my work, is like writing or reading and editing, journaling on themes and characters, writing in prose, so like processing with a different style, doing like source work and marginalia and research, which is that like listening to a podcast about a thing that's sort of related to this thing, making visual art, like doing a collage or drawing or stuff like that, going for a walk, seeking out professional development. So either taking a class or like listening to a sort of process related, technique related podcast or something like that. Or like seeking out inspiration. Like with this play, the tone that I wanted to capture was really specific. And so I made this list of like all the movies that I know of that might relate to that tone. And so if I'm like, my brain feels dead and I don't want to do this, or I'm tired or whatever, than like watching a movie or even just part of a movie that has something that I admire that feels related to this. And writing all that down and deciding that those were like specific techniques and that they all have value. And only like 2 of those things are like directly productive in the way that we would measure like, oh, I wrote 10 more pages today or whatever. Like only 2 of the writing and editing are really the only 2 things on that list that we like see as being a productive part of your process. But all of those things are so productive. And some of the most like important epiphanies or like corners turned in the working on this play have come from those other places.
Totally.
And so redefining what work is to include a much broader set of actions has been really, really helpful for me artistically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like crossing the wires too, the like visual art or like movement, you know, like I am an actor, so like doing weird dances or like, you know, getting out of my head, those things can be really, really supportive in very surprising ways. I also found that tracking it like that, like, yeah, having that calendar and being able to look back and, oh, in the month of April, like I actually, even though I only wrote 20 pages or whatever, let's say, you know, I worked on this for like 40 hours or whatever. That gives a little bit of a like reward. Yeah. And kind of inspiration.
It lets you be responsive too to like where you're at any given moment. Like you're had a terrible sleep or
right. Yeah.
you're in a part of your cycle where you're, I don't know, like it's, yeah.
Yeah. And that's like comfort with the weirdness of process. It's like process isn't linear. It's not going to look the same every day. It's immeasurable. And here are like 10 different examples of process that you can engage with depending on where you're at.
What did you called it working sideways?
Yeah. Or like lateral thinking kind of.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Well, with writing especially, I think sometimes you like have to sneak up on it because it's so intimidating otherwise, or it feels so important. Sneaking up on the hard parts, you know,
I like that.
I think is very helpful. A document can suddenly become like so important and untouchable and like sacred that you can't mess with it. And now I have this sort of proof to my future self that like all this chaos becomes something eventually at some point.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah. I find I have to have a very like light touch, light relationship to the actual writing work, or I very quickly get kind of scared of it. And I am very indecisive, which is really hard when you're writing something. And I'm intrigued because I'm moving from kind of taking off my playwright hat a little bit and putting on my director hat a little bit. And being a director is basically making like hundreds of decisions. So I'm sort of like bracing for that and just collecting whatever tools and like convictions I can to like be confident in the decisions I'm going to have to make.
Is there something you'd like to say about what's coming up? Anything that you want to promote or just share about what is coming up for you over the next several months?
Yeah, I'm excited about the next several months. The play that I'm producing in the spring in June is called The Mosquitos. It features mosquitoes in a sort of like chaotic, neutral, complicated role. And so it's been funny. I've like come to like really love mosquitoes in the last little while writing this play. I really like him resonating with them spiritually or something. So it's a great big production. There's like tons of actors. I'm hiring a whole design team, you know, some fantastic collaborators, and picturing this thing going from just being on the page and in my head into a like multi-dimensional big artistic process with lots of inputs and lights and sound and music and actors and hearing other people with my words in their mouth. It's very daunting, but it's totally exciting. But yeah, I think that this year will be a big test of like a lot of different skills and experiences that I have developed as a theater maker. And I'm quite excited to see what happens. And I feel very lucky. I have a lot of grant funding and a lot of enthusiastic collaboration. And it's really funny. Every once in a while, I'm like, why does this 100 pages of text matter at all? And then I'm like, no, it matters so much to me anyway. It matters so much to me. That's a very funny balance, actually, is like believing in the thing that you're doing enough to like go through all the hoops. And this is probably the biggest, most ambitious project I've done in a very long time. And so, yeah, continuing to believe in it over the next 6 months will be a good challenge.
Wow. Well, I know I live in the same part of the world as you, so I will get to actually see your production and I can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm also looking at the clock and seeing that school is almost done. And I don't know what's going to happen in your home, but kids are going to descend. My home will descend into chaos with the arrival of my children shortly.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on creative life, parenting, just, the chaos, the magic of how those two things come into our lives together?
I mean, I've just like lately I've been thinking a lot about just like making meaning, like we are meaning makers. And that's like what our lives are about. That's what our relationships are about. That's what art is about. Like to me, it feels very natural and good that we should be integrating these things into our lives and that they're not separate or distinct. And yeah, I do think becoming a parent and stepping into my identity as an artist around the same time has like helped me make them both feel grounded. I want to like dismantle the mystique and status and like separation of artist from everyday life. Like they are the same thing. Like we're meaning makers. Let's just do it.
Love it.
Kids and all.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is amazing. I can't wait to share this conversation out into the world.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marya, for your time and all your wonderful, thoughtful perspectives.
Thanks for making time for me. It's been lovely to chat.
Hello, is anybody out there? Hello, ooh, yeah, I know they never get an answer. Hello, ooh.
I want to shout out another huge thank you to Marya Folinsbee for joining me on Parenting Creative as my intrepid first ever guest. You can learn more about Marya's work at materialtheatre.ca or by following her on Instagram at material_theatre. I also want to give credit to my partner in parenting and podcasting, Jeremy Sauer, for all his work to make Parenting Creative sound great, and to Natural Sympathies for the use of her song Hello as the Parenting Creative theme song. The song asks, is anyone out there? And I hope that you are. If you want to hear more conversations about the alchemy of parenting and creative life, please help the podcast grow by visiting parentingcreative.com to sign up for our email newsletter. And if you're able, by becoming a founding member of Parenting Creative. You can find out more information about that on our website or in the show notes. Parenting Creative is recorded and produced on the traditional and unceded territory of the Sinaiaks in BC's Slocan Valley. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again soon.